And we're going to have to articulate that truth. It was driven home to me not long ago. I was in South Carolina, University of South Carolina. A young lady stood up at the end of my talk. And in the talk, I had, of course, done what I usually do in my speeches. I had talked about the moral crisis, but I'd also talked about the issue of abortion and the way in which it epitomizes the betrayal of our moral principles. And she got up, and it's hard for me to describe why it has left such an impression on my mind, but there was a contrast between the wholesome, all-American womanhood look of this young lady and then the words that she spoke. Because she stood up there and she looked at me with this wholesome, slip-of-the-thing look and the sense that you got just from her standing up that she wouldn't harm the hair on anyone's head. I mean, she just looked like the most sweet and wonderful person you'd ever want to see. And then she looks at me and she says, given your speech, could you tell me in 100 words or less? Now, I knew right there that the looks were deceiving. 100 words or less, why it is that you prefer the rights of potential persons to those of actual persons. And I think that that episode will never leave my mind, because I was struck with the truth that here before me was this wholesome-looking representative of American womanhood, and out of her mouth came words that would have been worthy of Goebbels or some other master of Holocaust, confronting me with her understanding that I had somehow violated some logic unspoken of her belief about American life, and that there I was preferring the rights of potential persons to those of actual persons. Now, as I thought and contemplated this, I decided, now wait a minute here, maybe she's missing the point. And so I looked at her and I said, you know, I think you're not understanding the assumption you're making when you ask me that question. And she looked at me quizzically, and I said, well, I have a 17-year-old son. How old are you? And she said, 19. And she said, I know you'll understand, and I hope that you'll forgive me if I say that my experience of my 17-year-old leads me to know that I and many other parents in this country have our days when we seriously doubt that people of your age are actual persons. And the audience chuckled at that, just the way you all did. But then I decided that having maybe, even if just a little bit, gotten her to see the shadow of the truth that what we withdraw from the most innocent, what we withdraw from the most helpless and vulnerable, what we withdraw in the way of protection of that principle of truth and integrity that we withdraw from the ones we want to stomp on today, has also been withdrawn from the ones who may want to stomp on us tomorrow. Sometimes when we think we've got the upper hand, we can forget that. I think one of the reasons I don't is, as I reminded this young lady, due to the fact that I look back on a heritage quite fresh and not that long ago, because only a little over 100-odd years ago, a man named Frederick Douglass, whom I learned greatly to admire from the reports of his great courage and eloquence in fighting slavery, he used to have to go around America giving a speech, the title of which was "That the Negro is a Man," in which, as I cannot forget, he purported to demonstrate that black Americans were actual persons. I don't know why the young lady didn't understand that in addressing this question to me, she addressed a question to someone who not that long ago was on the wrong side of that line, and who understands the mistake we make when we allow anyone to draw that line at all, which should not be in the hands of human beings and should not be subject to human choice and will. The line of my humanity was drawn by Almighty God, and I will stand upon it. It is that truth. That's the truth. But see, that truth, my right to stand up here and make that claim, My right to feel that I can raise my eyes and look in the face any power on this earth and say that they have no right, whatever their power or wealth or education or claims, whatever the might of government, whatever the majorities in society they represent, they have no legitimate right to disregard and trample upon that human dignity which I claim by virtue of God's authority. That's the American truth. It's the American principle that over the centuries, defeated might makes right and cast out the dark shadows of tyranny and despotism. We have hallowed ground all over this world with the blood of our patriots in defense of that simple principle of justice and the way of life that flows from it. But sadly now, as our founders understood, as Lincoln reminded us time and again, we have come to that moment when all may be lost. Not because of conquest, but because we have been willing to surrender or tolerate the surrender of that principle. And we not only, by the way, are withdrawing protection from ourselves potentially and from all of those who may end up on the wrong end of some worldly equation of power. We are also undermining our own moral self-respect. For what is it in the end that guarantees us against the abuse of liberty? I sometimes watch my Democrat colleagues over there, and I will say this for them. I disagree with almost everything they have to say about many things. But I have to admire them for the consistency of their position. Say, because here they are, and they go forward, and they do everything possible to champion those causes that will break down moral discipline, destroy respect for moral principle, dissolve the allegiance to God and everything else, cast him out of the schools, get rid of him in the public places, make sure that authority is not respected in conscience or in fact. They champion the agenda of moral dissolution and corruption, but at least they're consistent enough to understand that in the face of that dissolution of our character, the only answer for a decent and orderly society is an ever-expanding, ever more powerful system of government coercion and government control. And that they offer us as our future. See, they get it. They get it. They understand. Without character, no liberty. So we're going to take your liberty after we've undermined your character. They know what they're up to. And in this, I've got to say, they go one better. Some of my Republican colleagues and even some of my conservative friends who aren't Republican, who want to go out there and talk about limited government and how we need to reclaim control over our schools and our money and this and that and the other thing. And yet who want to deny that we first must champion those issues through which we will regain control over ourselves. But I want to say it clearly. The first prerequisite of any agenda that seeks to limit the power of government, that seeks to respect the responsibility and authority of parents for the schooling of their children, of workers for the spending of their own hard-earned dollars, all these things that involve us in the fight for our own rights and choices and liberty are grounded on this, that we must restore the moral basis of our own self-control and moral self-respect, because without it, we will surrender all our liberties. We will surrender them. We will surrender them because nobody wants to live in a society with people who are out of control. Best proof of it is the way we raise our children. Oh, it's all well and good to talk a good game about what can go on outside. I don't know too many parents who want their children acting like freedom means doing what you please at home. It's best proof that we don't want to live with people who think that freedom means doing what you please. It's impossible to sustain decency in life if we take that view, because in the end it amounts to saying do whatever you can get away with. Power justifies itself. Success justifies everything. Disregard the rules, trample on the others. So long as you get to the top, it's okay. A society rapacious and exploitative in that fashion would be a society in which no decent person would want to live.